Hey everybody, welcome to Money's No Object. I'm your host, Dylan Howell. This is episode number 144 of our YouTube channel and podcast, and I cannot be more excited to continue sharing with you guys personal finance topics that I think could be useful for you in your long-term financial journey. Today, we are going to be talking about paying off debt, and not just going about paying off debt and the process of paying off debt, but how specifically we need to go through paying off our debts. And when I'm talking about how we need to go through it, I mean, do we need to go through it by the debt's amount or by the interest rate on the debt or some other metric of the particular debt that we have outstanding. So we want to talk about that today and why the way that I have the debt repayment plan within the financial action plan set up is most advantageous for you and your family in getting out of debt and reaching long-term financial freedom. Before we get started though, if you could go down below, hit the big red subscribe button, like this video, leave me any feedback in the comments down below and I'll be sure to respond to anything that you leave down there. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify podcasts, then be sure to subscribe and leave me a review on either one of those platforms, and that'd be greatly appreciated. Follow me on social media at MNO with Dylan, and that's really good supplemental materials to all the things I'm putting out in these long form episodes on YouTube and the podcast every single day. And then if you need somebody to help you walk through your financial life, somebody to create a financial plan that is specific to you and your family's needs, then I can help you do that. Just go to my website, www.mnowithdylan.com. Click on the Work with Dylan tab and you can choose the financial coaching session type that would work best for you, and we can begin pushing towards your long-term financial goals together. Now, just as a quick recap, if you are not a constant viewer of the show, or you don't know what I am teaching on Money's No Object every day, then let me go over just the first parts of the financial action plan up until the point where we are going to pay off all of our consumer debt other than our home, because that's what we're focusing on today, is how we are going to go about paying off all of that consumer debt other than our home. And so that is the fourth step of our financial action plan. So the first three are: one, we need to budget. We need to have a unique monthly budget that we are going to follow, and that is going to be our guideline as to how we spend our money month to month. Because if you don't know where your money's going, then you will wonder where it went, right? You don't have an idea of where your money's coming from or where it is going, then you are going to be in a bad financial position, and you are going to struggle to get ahead financially, whether it's paying off debt or building wealth over the long term. You're just not going to be able to do it if you don't have control over your income. So that's why we budget. And then we build 1 month worth of expenses within an emergency fund, so a savings account or a high interest savings, a money market account, something like that. We want that money to be insurance for us, and that is just the beginning of our emergency fund, and it will insure us against any kind of tragedy that is going to occur in our life. But we'll buff that up later after we get out of all consumer debt. But the third part of the financial action plan is that if you have an employer-sponsored retirement account that has a match, then we are going to take advantage of that match, because that is free money that we could be taking advantage of. And so we want to be taking advantage of that. That way we can begin to flex that muscle of saving and investing for the future. And so what those first three steps do is they give us control over our money by budgeting. They give us a little bit of a buffer between ourselves and life with that little bit of emergency fund. They get us to begin the process of investing and building wealth over the long term if we have that particular option. And then you get to the fourth part of the financial action plan, and that is where we are going to pay off all consumer debts. And this is all consumer debts other than your home. And we will talk more tomorrow about why the mortgage is different from these other consumer debts that I want you to get out of. But we are going to pay off all consumer debts other than our home. And the way in which that I want you to do that is from lowest amount to highest amount. And there is a reason that I say lowest amount to highest amount and not some other metric or some other way of doing it, or some way of, okay, let's look at the interest rates and pay it off from highest interest rate to lowest interest rate. No. That is not how we want to do it. And the whole idea behind this particular episode is to explain to you why, because that seems logical and that seems like the way that most people would want to go about it, is by interest rate. But we are going to do, they call it the debt snowball method, and that has been coined many times. But Dave Ramsey has been the biggest proponent of the debt snowball method over the years, and it absolutely works. It absolutely helps get people out of debt. and we are going to talk about why it works. We're going to compare it to the method of getting out of debt based on highest to lowest interest rate. And then we are going to look at how it may work in practicality, in practice, with the actual debts that we may have. So let's just dive right into this idea of the debt snowball method and look at why this is what works and this is what we want to do within our debt repayment plan in the financial action plan parts. So like I said, the debt snowball method is paying off your debts from lowest amount to highest amount. And the reason that this works and the reason that this is such an approved method, such a widely used method, is that what individuals do is they pay the minimum payments on all debts except for the smallest debt that they have. And that smallest debt, they're going to attack it with all other cash flow that they have available until that debt is paid off. Then they will roll the entire payment that they were putting on that smallest debt into the next smallest debt. And so you will keep making the minimum on that next smallest plus all of the money that you were putting on the smallest debt that you had already paid off. And you will continue to do that and roll those payments into the next debt over and over and over again until you end up paying off the largest debt that you have. And the idea behind this is purely behavioral, right? This is not a mathematical equation. This is a behavioral tactic. And the reason that it is behavioral is because what you are trying to do is get small wins. You are trying to get some momentum built up. Just like when you're trying to make a snowball or trying to roll a snowball into a part of a snowman. And, those of us who live in Texas, we have seen plenty of snowmen and snowballs and things like that over the past few days. But if you're trying to do that, you want to create some momentum, right? You need to pick up snow as you go. You need to continue to push forward, and it will compound on itself quite quickly. Well, in the same way, when you're doing the debt snowball method, then you are picking up the payments from the previous debts and pushing them into the new larger debts that you were trying to get paid off. And along the way, you are making progress. You are seeing the progress that you make. You are seeing that you are getting some small wins, and you're starting to get some confidence that, hey, I can do this. I can pay off my debt. I can get all of these large debts paid off. I can pay off my $150,000 in student loans that I have, or I can pay off, this $50,000 car, or, any number of things, or even as far as I can eventually get my home paid off for those who don't believe that that is possible. It is 100% possible, and using these types of methods will allow you to do it in a way that is going to help you behaviorally to understand that you can do it. But since this is not necessarily the best mathematical choice, it leaves people kind of scratching their head like, okay, it's not the best thing mathematically, but it works best for people and saves people the most money over time. Why is that? Well, what those people are typically juxtaposing this approach to is what we will call the debt avalanche instead of the debt snowball. We will call it the debt avalanche idea. And this is paying off debts by interest rate, paying them off from highest interest rate to lowest interest rate. And the reason that this would make sense, obviously, is because you want to get rid of any high interest rate debt that you have. Because obviously you're going to pay more interest, and it is going to be more costly to you over time to pay off higher interest rate debts than it is lower interest rate debts. And so when somebody is trying to go through the debt avalanche way of doing things, what they're going to do is obviously stop using debt in the same way that we would, right? We are going to stop using debt before we try to get out of any of our debts. And so we're going to call debt quits, and then we are going to write down all of our debts they will go from highest interest rate to lowest interest rate. And remember that debt is anything that you owe to anyone else. And so this means your personal loans, your student loans, your car notes, anything that your credit card bills, anything like that will be listed out, and they would list it out from largest interest rate to smallest interest rate. So an example of this would be if somebody had a $20,000 credit card at 20%, they would put that at the top. And then let's say a $9,000 personal loan at 17%. Okay, that's next. And then a $10,000 student loan at 5%. And then that's where you see it, right? That's where you see that amount does not matter in this particular method that people use, because the $9,000 personal loan was ahead of the $10,000 student loan, and the $20,000 credit card was above the $9,000 personal loan. And so the amount does not matter. It's just going simply by interest rate. So far, it's 20, 17, and 5. And then let's say there's a car loan for $16,000 that's at 4.25%, and then a car loan for $2,000 at 4%, right? And you would line up these debts in this particular way, and you would list them by interest rate, largest to smallest. So with this example, folks who use the debt avalanche might begin by paying off the $20,000 credit card balance first. And once they pay off that particular debt, then what will happen is they will work their way to the next highest interest rate. So in this particular case, the $9,000 personal loan, they will work their way to that and continue to work their way down all the way to the lowest interest rate debt. Now, it gets kind of weird here, okay? So even though you are doing this in a way that seems mathematically correct and that will save you money over the long term, it gets a little weird. And the reason that it gets weird is because you're going to lose motivation, especially if you're trying to just start off by paying off a $20,000 loan. It is going to be extremely difficult to keep any type of motivation towards paying your debts off. I mean, obviously you want to. Obviously nobody wants a $20,000 credit card that's hanging over their head at a 20% interest rate. Obviously nobody wants that. But the problem with just paying that off right up front, or attempting to pay that off right up front, is that you are just going to be making minimum payments on these really small debts that you have, right? Where this is your largest debt in amount and your highest interest rate. And so it's going to be accruing interest that, one, is going to be difficult to keep up with in your payments, and two, it's already a relatively large amount. So if you don't have large amounts of cash to throw at it, it's going to be hard to get ahead. It's going to be hard to go ahead and get that thing paid off in a reasonable amount of time. That is why when we use the debt snowball method, right, from paying things off smallest amount to largest amount, you can pay off things a little quicker, even if they are lower interest rate debts. You can pay these things off quicker and get momentum and get that confidence, get the confidence of thinking that you can get things paid off. Because just think, if you're going to start paying off a $20,000 debt and that particular debt is not making much headway, and you're like, man, I'm throwing money at this and nothing's really happening because it's high interest rate and it's a large amount and all this type of stuff, you could get demoralized and you could stop and you could just say, you know what, I'm done. And a lot of people do. A lot of people start trying to pay off debts, especially by interest rate, and they will quickly get demoralized because they're like, there is no way I'm ever going to be able to pay this off reasonably. I'm just not getting any wins in a reasonable amount of time. Because just like with anything else, just think about losing weight. If you're trying to lose weight, you want to see pounds fall off quickly. Because if you quickly see pounds fall off, then guess what? You're more likely to stay on the wagon. You're more likely to continue working whatever plan you have been working, because we want to see short-term results. Now, I know we want to be long-term in view, and I'm very long-term in view, but just our psychology is when we do something, when we put a plan in place, we don't want to sit around a long time before we see that plan come to fruition and things start to work. We want to see things work quickly in order to keep doing that. We want to see that there's some kind of reason, some type of motivation that we have for continuing to do whatever we have been doing or whatever we plan on doing in the future. And if we don't get that type of motivation, if we don't see those types of wins, then we'll just stop sometimes. And that is the problem with the debt avalanche that the debt snowball doesn't have. The debt snowball will allow you to pick up the momentum, will allow you to have the motivation, because even if you are paying off a low interest rate debt early on that is a small amount, at least you get it paid off, and you'll say, hey, well, I can get it paid off, and I can put the money that I was putting on that onto this next debt and the next and the next. And then you can start making some headway that you could not make if you were just trying to pay off the highest interest rate first. And Ramsey Solutions has shown that the debt snowball method will allow people on average to pay off all of their debts in 18 to 24 months, where this debt avalanche idea of paying things off by interest rate, it takes a long time to pay off the first debt, and so it takes longer to end up paying off all of their debts overall. So it becomes a little more difficult, and obviously more people quit such a plan because it takes more time and because they aren't seeing the type of headway, the type of wins that they want to see. And then with the debt snowball method, after several bills are paid, you begin to see the light at the end of the tunnel. After you've paid off multiple debts, you see the light. You see that you can do things. But with the debt avalanche, it's just hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel because you might not be getting anything paid off, right? Those debts, even though they may be decreasing in value, maybe it may be working mathematically to where that would be, if you were to stick with it, the fastest way to pay off your debt. It is not going to help you mentally. It's not going to help you behaviorally to pay things off in the way that you should, because there will be no light at the end of the tunnel. It'd be difficult to see past those big debts that are in your way. It'll be difficult to see past all the interest that you're going to have to pay between now and the end of your debt repayment. It is going to be hard in order to look past those types of things and get any type of win, unless you can break your big debts into, some smaller amounts and be able to see, that oh, I paid off this amount, and you count those as wins, but those accounts are still going to have balances, and that is going to be hard to get over mentally. The truth of the matter is that as long as you do something to become debt free, like, I'm not mad at you, right? I'm not mad if you choose to pay things off the debt avalanche way versus the debt snowball. I'm not mad at that. I'm not mad if you line things up by interest rate or make your decisions based on interest rate. I'm not mad about that. But you have to understand that what we are trying to do is to create the most efficient line between where you're at and long-term financial success and long-term financial freedom. And the most efficient way, the shortest path between A and B, is paying them off via the debt snowball method. It has worked for millions of people, and it can work for you too. But the debt avalanche method, even though it is mathematically correct and can work, it is just hard to get over behaviorally, even for people who understand mathematics. Even for myself, who understands finance, understands mathematics very, very well, to look and say, well, I'm going to have to pay off this big high interest rate debt. That's going to take a lot longer, and it's going to be a lot more difficult to get to the place that I want to be. I'm going to have to dig really hard right out of the gate. I'm not going to get any short-term wins. I'm not going to be able to build any momentum. I'm going to have to hit the wall hard. I'm going to have to punch hard in order to get through very, very quickly. Whereas with the debt snowball method, not saying that you should not be intense, because you absolutely have to be in order to get out of debt and the debt that many Americans are in. You have to be intense and very intentional in the way that you go about things. But you can, with the debt snowball method, find it easier. You can find it easier to pay off those smaller debts first. And it'll be really, really satisfying. It'll be really, really satisfying to see zero balances, and really, really satisfying to move on to the next debt with the payment that you were bringing from the smaller debt, and to continue to roll it forward. So I would definitely suggest the debt snowball method, but the debt avalanche method, if you can make it work for yourself, it can work, but I do not suggest, I do not think that is the best idea. And I do not think that is the best way for you to get to long-term financial freedom. I think you need to line your debts up from smallest to largest in amount and pay them off in that way. Now, if you line things up smallest to largest, and let's say you have a $6,000 debt and a $7,000 debt, and the $6,000 debt has a 3% interest rate and the $7,000 debt has a 20% interest rate. I don't have a problem with you saying, well, hey, I would rather pay off that $7,000 debt instead of that $6,000, because they are relatively similar in amount, right? The difference between paying off $6,000 and $7,000 is not crazy, and the interest rate is so different. And in that way, I see the merit in paying some attention to the interest rate and understanding that a higher interest rate debt is obviously going to cost you more. So yes, pay that off first. Or something else that you may want to try, or may see if you can do, is try to consolidate some of your debts down into lower interest rate amounts. Now, the difficult thing with debt consolidation is it can be extremely costly. So I don't want you to spend a lot of money to consolidate your debts down, one. And two, sometimes when you consolidate it down, you may consolidate 4 or 5 debts into one loan. And that loan, even though it may be a low interest rate loan, can end up being a really high amount. And again, that brings up the same issue that the debt avalanche brings along, where you have this big debt amount and it's hard to get over the hump. It's hard to get that thing paid off because it is such a daunting amount. You feel like you're not making a lot of progress, and that's not what we want. We want you to be able to make progress. So I'm completely okay if you're going to save a lot of money in consolidating your debts down to a lower interest rate. But if you cannot refinance your debts in that way, if you cannot consolidate your debts in that way, then I do not want you to do it. I do not want you to be refinancing debts that are going to make it more difficult for you to win long term. Because you have to remember, even if you can refinance something or consolidate something down, even if you can do that, the difficulty is that you still have to pay the debt off, right? You can move debts around all that you want to. You can refinance, you can change lenders. You can do all of these different types of things. You can rob Peter to pay Paul, meaning you can pay off a debt with a credit card. Well, that's still going to be debt, right? You can do those types of things. But at the end of the day, what's going to end up happening is you are still going to have to pay that debt off. And it may be at a lower interest rate, which might be advantageous to you. But you have to understand that when you do these types of things, you are not really making the headway that you need to make. You may be helping yourself over the long term with a lower rate, but you are not making the headway in paying things off in the way that you need to. So the best thing you can do is just start. Just run into the process, smallest to largest in amount, not largest to smallest in interest rate, and you will start to make headway, and you will start to see some wins, especially if you have some really small debts, less than $1,000, things like that you can get paid off just real quick. You'll start to feel the momentum, and you'll start to feel the weight of that debt coming off of you, and you will be able to push towards long-term financial success and be able to continue through the financial action plan in the way that would be most advantageous towards you, which I think is the way that I have laid out. So once we get our debts paid off, like I said earlier, that beginner emergency fund is not the end of our emergency fund. We want to build on to that. So the fifth part of the financial action plan is building that emergency fund up to 4 to 6 months of expenses. So you would do that after you got out of debt. And then after you did that, then you would go and you would begin investing at least 15% of your income towards your future. So your kids' college funds, your retirement comes first. Then you can go to kids' college funds and your brokerage accounts and things like that to really build long-term wealth. And then you get to the seventh step, which needs to be done simultaneously with the sixth, putting extra money on your home in order to get your home paid off. And like I talked about earlier, I will talk more about your mortgage and why I think the way I do about mortgages in tomorrow's episode. But you'll get your mortgage paid off in the seventh step, in the seventh part of the financial action plan. And then in the eighth and ninth, the eighth is we're going to begin maxing out all investing options that we have. So putting all the money that we can into these different investment options to really push towards our long-term wealth building goals. And then the ninth part is being extremely generous, being generous beyond all belief, and being able to give in ways that we never thought that we could give before, being able to be generous in really large ways. And the reason that I go through and I tell you all of these steps, I tell you all of these parts of the financial action plan and how they work is because if you know this, if you know how the parts after paying off consumer debt works, then you will understand why it is so important to pay off all your consumer debts and not skip that step or not leave some debts behind. It'll make sense why I think the debt snowball method and the way that I want you to pay off debts is so important. Because if you can get the momentum and you can get to paying off those debts and you can get to feel like you're doing something and making headway in your financial life, then you can continue to believe into the future. You can believe that you can build up a big emergency fund. You can believe that you can save 15% of your income towards your future. You can invest for your future, because most people don't even know what that would look like. They don't even know what it would look like to take 15% of their income and just put it away for the future and just invest it and allow it to grow. People don't know what that would look like, and that is a daunting thought. And much less the task to actually do. But if you have paid off all your consumer debt, you may not think of it as being such a daunting task. And so you can do that. You know that you have the confidence in order to do that. And if you've paid off all of these debts, and maybe you've paid off some big, student loans or big card notes or whatever it may be, then you may have the confidence and the motivation to get your home paid off when it's time to do so within the financial action plan, and have the confidence in order to step into that place and pay your home off. And then obviously it will make it even easier for you to max things out and be extremely generous, because you will see how difficult it is to do things with money. You will see how it takes time, it takes practice, it takes you actually implementing a plan in order to make things work. And I'm just trying to provide the best plan there is for you. I try to find the shortest way that you can get to where you need to go. I try to look at what other people have done, what has been successful in other people's lives, and say, how can I put that into a plan that will be useful for just about everyone? And I think if there is one crucial part of your financial action plan that you have to focus the most on, it is paying off consumer debt. And if you want to pay off consumer debt as quickly and with as little friction as possible, then you need to do it using the debt snowball method. And you will not regret putting that money on the line. You will not regret lining your debts up that way, getting that motivation, getting that momentum, and that confidence to move forward in your financial life. Now, look, I'm sure I will get detractors to this. I'm sure that people will not like this idea and they don't think, oh, it's not mathematically correct. How would you say you're good at math? You don't understand the mathematics behind it, blah, 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 blah. I understand the mathematics. I understand what can save you the most money over time. And it's actually not the thing that's mathematically correct. It is the thing that is behaviorally correct. Behavior is so important within your personal finances that it's outrageous. And it's the same people that will say that this is not what you should do, or the same people that will say, oh, we'll just take out the 30-year mortgage, which is not a good idea statistically if you want to build long-term wealth. And it's the same people that'll say, oh, we'll just keep a mortgage around and invest the difference. Don't pay extra on your home, right? And these are the same people who have not actually put these things into practice. I have paid off debt using the debt repayment plan that I am laying forward for you. And I've done it. I've done it with my wife. We have done it successfully. And in doing so, it frees you up and it happens fast. The ability to pay off debt in this way, it happens fast. And it gives you the motivation to think, hey, I can win financially. It gives me the motivation to sit here and talk to you guys every single day about things that are going on in your financial life. And so I want to continue giving you this motivation. I want to continue giving you these tips and tricks. And this is just one that has to work. It's one that continues to work time and time again, because if you are going to build long-term financial success, if you are going to create the life for yourself that you want to live, you have to be out of debt. You have to get to a place where you are not pushing all your cash flow out the door and giving your money to other people, because if you don't have debt, then what you have is actually money. You have money in your wallet, and that is what we want at the end of the day. And we want to have options and the freedom to be able to use that money to do any number of things in our financial life. And the best way to get to that point where you have money in your wallet, where you have options, you have freedom, is to use the debt snowball method, listing your debts from smallest to largest, attacking the smallest with a vengeance, and continuing to roll the payments from the smallest one into the next smallest one, all the way up to the largest debt that you have. And then you're debt free, and then you can do whatever you want with your money. So hey guys, thanks for watching this video. If you could go down below, hit the big red subscribe button, like this video. Leave me any feedback in the comments below if you haven't done so already, and I'll be sure to respond to anything you leave down there. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify podcast, then be sure to subscribe and leave me a review on either one of those platforms, and that'd be much appreciated. Follow me on social media at MNO with Dylan, and that's really good supplemental materials to all the things I'm putting out in these long form episodes on YouTube and the podcast every single day. And then if you need somebody to help you walk through your financial life and create a financial plan that is specific to you and your family's needs, I can help you do that. Just go to my website, www.mnowithdylan.com. Click on the Work with Dylan tab, and you can choose the financial coaching session type that would work best for you, and we can begin pushing towards your long-term financial goals together. Tune in tomorrow as I talk about why your mortgage is different and why I do not include it in this debt snowball, but why the debt snowball can 100% help you when it comes to paying your mortgage off. So thanks for tuning into this episode of Money's No Object. I'm your host, Dylan Howell. God bless.